Hey, hardworking Christian mom, welcome to the Victorious Working Mom. Do you want more time and less mom guilt? Do you find yourself up late at night searching time, productivity, and life hacks? Do you wake up with big ambitious goals only to feel like you're dropping the ball or missing the important stuff when life happens and everyone needs you again? Hey, I'm Dr. Naka. I too was trying to do all the things at home and work and burning out. I too felt overworked and underappreciated and wished to hide or escape and get a much needed break. I wanted to be present at home, productive at work, and be calm and rested, but I kept telling myself this is what it is to be a working mom and I had to suck it up and deal. Until I found God's power to be present and set priorities. In this podcast, you will find time, space, and support so that you will be less busy, less cranky, and less lonely. So get comfy in your hiding place from your kids and let's grow, glow, and go.
Hello, lovely. I have had this on my heart for a while. First, how you doing? Thanks for listening. But I had something on my heart for a while that I'd love to share with you. I've really been burdened, meaning this bothers me. This occupies my time in between patients, in the evening when I'm driving, and just trying to be obedient and get it out. As I've getting over 10 years from residency, from my formal training as a physician, became a grown-up doctor, I really think about the lessons, I won't say lessons, that's kinder than saying mistakes, or just so much that I didn't know that you just learn along the way, and just feel burdened, like, what if I could share this with somebody else? I do work with residents sometimes, but it's usually very brief, maybe a few hours of one of my urgent care shifts, but not on a regular basis. And I just have that, I don't want to say a yearning to pour into somebody or someone, to say, hey, you don't have to walk it alone. If you're early in your career, and not even necessarily early in your career, maybe you've been in a career but new to motherhood, it's a lot when you're in a profession like healthcare, for example, where you're in school for years to get to this point that you're qualified to do a job. It's not something you can just Google, you could just online, and shout out to online business owners. I don't mean it in a shady way, but it's like you need to be certified. Somebody needs to put you on. You have to go through a process. It's not just something that you say, if I believe it, I can achieve it, and just start posting and getting likes. That's not the way you get through medical school, pharmacy school, dental school, for example, heck, law school, or engineering. Like, you have to be anointed and appointed. Like, real talk. And when you've been in a space where, baby, from young adolescence through a good portion of your adult life, you have been striving towards a primary goal, and maybe you've had another career before, but it probably wasn't as long as you've been striving to be a physician, right? And then physician, for example, or professional, and it's like, you have to go through a process, and you have to submit to that process, and it's very consuming. In my own personal journey, and I don't know if anyone can relate, it's like I had to climb this tall mountain, and I get to what's supposed to be the peak. It's like, now what? And while I'm busy climbing this mountain, there's a lot of life lessons and experience I didn't have. And then people say, well, for example, using an example of being a healthcare professional, you're supposed to live like a resident. You're supposed to be patient and defer gratification. Look, I done been deferring gratification. I said I done been on purpose. I done been deferring gratification for over a decade. I is tired. It's time for me to enjoy. I have seen my friends make money, go on vacation, build a fourth floor, buy a home, have a family, and I've been in the library. Okay? There's plenty of family functions and things I have missed to get to this mountaintop. People say, well, it's what you signed up for, but you don't know to what extent. I want to help people. We all wrote that on the essay, but we don't know. This means that some of your viable, fertile years, you're going to be tied up in something if you didn't walk into it with children. And it's kind of more for the people like, this is what I've been riding on since I was a kid or a young adolescent or a young adult. And now I've made it. But what does that mean? Now, everybody's coming at me, tell me how I didn't need to do with this money that no one ever bothered really to tell me how to manage. Now I have all this responsibility. It's not just being a learner. It's not just, hey, did you show up? Who's going to cover? It's like you are responsible for people. You generate revenue, whether if you show up or not. You know what I mean? It's a different beast. And it's a different level of responsibility. Not just a career. It was usually, you've been putting off some other things too. If you're listening to this, you might have put off childbearing to finish. Or maybe you started, at least you got your foot in something. Or along the way. And it's like, how do I manage all this new? Because that's how I felt. New attendant, new wife, new mother. It was in a new city. It was just a lot of new. And it was beautiful. It was a blessing. It was answered prayer. All right. But it stressed me out. I was so anxious and overwhelmed. I couldn't even always talk about it. And then if you're like, well, she's being funny, or I'm not here for her, she's not updating me, I guess I'm not in her inner circle. At that time, I wasn't in my inner circle. And I think about it now, and I wish somebody would have been able to take my hand and be like, sis, you good. You're going to be okay. There's ebbs and flows to this. These are things that you can do now. Take this one small step. And as you go along the process, you'll get there, right? Well, I didn't quite have that exact person. I had people in my life. I'm not saying that. But there wasn't many mentors as far as people that were going through what I've been through. And a lot of the friends that were going through it at the same time, they were just as overwhelmed. It's like, girl, I don't even know. I cried in my car before I went to work. Or I cried in my car before I get in the house. Or I'm just irritable. Or I eat more. I drink more. Or I just scroll social media. Or I binge out on television. Or, YouTube or whatever. Not many people had answers. And the people that perceived to have answers, they're definitely behind a paywall. Which, hey, no shade. I understand value and all of that. But when you're in the very beginning, it's just like, can I get a friend? And why are friends all of a sudden so hard to come by? So the journey is so common, but it's so unspoken. And especially when people have an expectation that you're supposed to be happy. You're supposed to be fulfilled. You're supposed to know what you're doing. And you're like, man, I got a lot of years. I need to work. I might have a large debt. So when you're like, I'm just going to fire. I'm just going to travel the world. I'm just going to stop working. You may not be one of those people, because you might have what feels like an insurmountable amount of student loan debt because you spent a good portion of your life as a student. And even if you had financial help, a lot of times, especially for women, we don't always get to fight wealth building. We don't get wealth management. We might get saved or don't spend too much, but we may not know how to make the dollar work for us, for example. And then relationally, a lot of time, not saying that people don't date, have relationships, can't marry, have kids, but a lot of us, probably who this hangs on, we weren't doing as much of it as in comparison to our peers. Because our time was tangled up in this school thing, and we figured, okay, when I get through training, then I'll be open and available, right? And sometimes, hey, you find love at that time. Like I said, for a lot of my friends and myself that were in training and residency, it was like towards the end that people were starting to get married and have children, maybe the end of residency or as they were finishing, right? It's new attending. And it is a game changer. And I feel like, there's definitely groups, very large groups, and even that can be overwhelming because it's so large and so many different experiences and so many different types of moms. And I just sometimes it was hard to see my experience. Like, I am in a new profession. I've prepared for it, but it's different when you're in it. And there wasn't a ton of mentorship on how to do this. how to normalize some of the things that I was feeling, how to manage the newness of now. I have a higher responsibility at work, and I have a higher responsibility at home. Okay. And this has now become a 24-hour job. And I have a lot of high expectations, and there's a lot of high expectations of me. And it felt like a lot of the things I used to do to unwind, to relax, to de-stress, or either not as available to me, or I had to get creative and figure out a different way. Or I assumed, well, I'm a mother now, so I don't need time to myself. I'm a mother now. I'm supposed to know these magical ways to soothe my child. I'm a loving mother. My child shouldn't cry or be fussy, not want to eat what I prepared. I'm a physician, for example. My child shouldn't be constipated. And if they are, I'm supposed to know exactly what to do because I went to school for this, right? And I'm a family physician, so I can see all ages, all stages, right? Imagine that's what saying sounds like there's very little grace or compassion. Maybe the implicit or unspoken expectations I had of myself, that maybe my husband had of me, that, culturally and all that. For me, from a West African background, from Nigeria, so is my husband. And so there's a lot of cultural norms, and I live outside of Nigeria and did not grow up in Nigeria. That just adds a lot of layers. What I saw growing up was Claire Huxtable. You were this professional woman, but you were this domestic goddess at the same time. You had it all together. How did she have it all together? I never saw a maid. I never saw anybody else taking care of the kids or cooking the food. How did they do it all? I think Heathcliff Huxtable had his office, his medical office in the basement, and she was a lawyer. And with those things, those imprints of the stay-at-home mom who's there with you when you come home with, fresh snacks ready. So then now working like, wait a minute, I done worked all day. I left the house early. I worked all day. I'm dead tired. I done picked this child up from daycare. I already feel guilty that I have to put my child in daycare because I was like, oh, the daycare is this, and this. Well, are you going to watch my kid? You're not available to. You don't live in the same town as me, so I had to do what I had to do, right? And I was in a work situation with very set hours and a longer commute, and it was draining. And then the joy of being a mom and getting through that pregnancy and not realizing that I probably had postpartum depression and not fully understanding what that was until I went to a conference and the presenter, I felt like, was reading my diary. For example, I would be afraid of dropping my baby. And I was too ashamed because I thought that meant I was a bad mother to tell anybody. So nobody knew that, right? And I go to this conference because I was scrambling. I had to get caught up on my continuing medical education before the end of that year. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I had to start going to leave my child, my new baby, and go to all these conferences that were outside of where I lived. And so I'm sitting in this conference, probably in Gorge, because I couldn't pump well or store my milk or had to dump it or something. And feel like, postpartum is common to feel like you're going to drop your baby. And I was like, there's no way she could know. And I went up to her and was like, you basically just told my life story, how I've been feeling for months, and I didn't know. So, and I would have never talked to anybody about it, that I'm scared to hold my baby, I'm scared to drop my baby. You know what I mean? I started realizing, you know what? I think it's time to start talking to somebody about the overwhelm I'm feeling, the bigness of the responsibility. Now I don't have an attending to check out to, and I got to make final decisions on these patients, and I'm legally liable for it. The desire to, read up and learn more about what's going on with my patients, and just only so much time. Just like I single woman, no kids, go to the gym at night. But no gym. I have a baby to take care of. And you know what I'm saying? You're trying to, juggle schedules and get there before they close because they find you. So a lot of the spontaneity that my single friends would do, or childless friends, and just say, hey, let's meet up for drinks, let's do this on the fly. Yeah, that's out. Because guess what? That daycare, I got to catch it before it closes, right? And I have a long commute. Does any of this resonate? It's life change. And I needed help with pivoting, accepting that my roles and some of my identity has shifted, and that every change has a little bit of loss. It's like, where did single student NECA go? Where did NECA before the kids go? Kid at that time. Now it's kids go. Where do I put my dreams and hopes? Have I arrived? If I want to pursue more than what I'm doing right now, is that selfish? Am I being a good wife? Or, all those things. Are my parents proud of me? Can I live up to those expectations that people have of me now? When folk call you, they call with, by the way, medical questions, or I just want to run this by you. And that's just a different beast than what I dealt with before. And I think I just needed coping skills. So starting the journey to go to counseling, just like, I don't feel right. I feel really overwhelmed by what I'm doing. And I feel like I should be really happy and overjoyed, but I feel very burdened. So I'm going to pause there. Going to counseling, being therapy is great. And it's been a journey. And I speak about it to normalize it, especially if you're a woman of color. That may not be, or immigrant family, that may not be what you grew up with. But I think it's all the more reason we need to do it, because we're trying to fit ourselves in spaces that weren't built for us. And there is, some people call that patriarchy, but that can really add to a lot of the micro trauma, those little cuts, because you're always trying to blend in or be palatable or acceptable. And there's just a lot of stress with that. I don't want to seem aggressive. I don't want to seem unprofessional. I don't want to seem like I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't want to be too casual. I don't want to be this and that. So when do I get to be me? And how do I grow into the me that can sustain what's going on in my life, or know how to steer the ship where I want it to be, versus trying to be an imitation somebody else, right? But I also want to put a fork in this story. What do you think were things I could have considered? Where do you think that there were some limiting beliefs? Where do you think that there were some opportunities to reach out for help? Where do you think there were some new habits or activities that I could have picked up? I want to think about that, because as I go through the story, I want us to see ourselves and then see, well, if this was my friend, if this was my colleague, what would I do to encourage that person? Because that helps along the way to kind of pick. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Victorious Working Mom Podcast. If this podcast episode has blessed you, kept you company, please feel free to like, review, and follow, and share with a fellow working mom. You can connect on IG at Victorious Working Mom, on Facebook, Neka Ichoku, DOMPH, and our website, www.victoriousworkingmom.com. Feel free to join the Christian Professional Mom community, and let's continue to grow, glow, and go. Be blessed.